interchangeably were not thinking. There's a difference between an ism and a logy. An ism is a position, a theory. Phenomenalism is the view that all we know is appearances. A logy is a study of, a science of, a methodological thing. You see. Now, phenomenology then, okay, is the study of the phenomena. Oh, it's not saying only phenomena can be known, but it's saying that we start with a study of the phenomena. Get the difference? Yes, because if you're trying to get at the structure of the self, what is it that is the functional structuring that goes on in the development of consciousness and self-consciousness? You see, well, you have to describe the process, don't you? You have to describe the phenomena of developing consciousness. So the method is phenomenological. Well, now in 20th century, the term is fairly common. And even though you find some unphilosophical people using the term interchangeably with phenomenalism, the two are very, very different. You find its proper use in a phrase like phenomenology of religion, you see, which is used in two senses. One is a phenomenology of religious experience, describing the phenomena of religious experience. Another is phenomenology of religion is describing beliefs and practices, the phenomena at that social level, cult level. You see, phenomenology. It's a descriptive method. It's not an attempt to prove something with demonstrative arguments. The old demonstrative arguments of the Descartes-Locke tradition, no, that's past. That was part of dogmatic metaphysics. You see. What you have is a descriptive method. And the conclusion to an effective description is not therefore such and such, QED. The conclusion to an effective description is, oh, I see. Yeah, that's the way it is. You see? Okay? Because what you're doing with your description is saying to somebody, hey, come and look at this. See what I see. You see? And the validity of the description is underscored when you get that consensual social process, you see, the interpersonal agreement about what indeed is properly being described. So it's a descriptive approach rather than a demonstrative approach. So when you read Hegel, don't say to yourself, well, what has he proven? What's this piece about master and servant? Has he proven anything? He's not trying to prove anything. He's just trying to describe the interpersonal dynamics by virtue of which the master becomes aware of himself as master, and the servant becomes aware of herself as servant. You see? The developing self-awareness, self-consciousness described. But that is just a shadow image of the whole, or the whole is a shadow image of that. You see, microcosm, macrocosm. Let me pause there with one other footnote that strikes me. I hadn't thought of this particularly before. Last fall, when we got started with the pre-Socratics, I was trying to point out that from before the beginnings of philosophy, back in the Greek poets, Homer, Hesiod, so forth, there is an idea of ordered unity, such that the ordering of the moral life of an individual is a microcosm of the ordered justice of a city-state, which is a microcosm of the ordered unity of the cosmos. Remember? So that the self, morally ordered, right, the just individual, is a microcosm of an ordered cosmos. Now, notice how radical the change at this juncture. In a way, it's coming back to that theme, you see. The ordered unity of the self is a microcosm of the ordered unity of reality as a whole. You see. But for the Greek philosophers, it was developed in terms of the ordered unity of the physical universe. Oh. Now it's in terms of the ordered universe of the world of ideas. The world of culture. You see. Of art, of religion. You see. But the idea of the self being a microcosm of the whole is still here. So don't be surprised if in Hegel, reading about Hegel, you run into the notion of the logos. You see. Because Hegel, in his religious writing, reintroduced the logos concept, which had been eclipsed during the mechanistic age, which had no teleology. Okay, what did I say then? A new scientific model, a new philosophical method, phenomenological description. All right, a new logic. A new logic. Because what we have had is a logic of the syllogism. Syllogistic logic. What we are going to get is a logic of process. And that logic of process is dialectic. Syllogistic logic is a logic of unchanging universals. Why? Well, you know the basic rule of the simple categorical syllogism. All A is B, all B is C, therefore all A is C. You see, the basic rule of the syllogism is that there is a middle term, and the middle term must be universally extended at least once. That is to say, B must be universal, all B, at least once, in order that B, this particular B, can be part of this. Otherwise, there's no connection. You've got to have a connective. The connective has to be about a universal. You see. Now, of course, it can be about a universal class of people, but it would have to be a class of people unchanging in a certain respect. You see. In other words, you've got to have unchanging universals of some sort. At least unchanging universal concepts. So this logic was devised, was organized, developed by Aristotle, with his emphasis, you see, on universals, unchanging universal concepts, classes, species. Oh, but now, if we've got a developmental concept in science and in history, you see, how are you going to think about what's going on in the developmental process? Obviously, that's going to raise the question, are there any universals? And Hegel is going to have to restructure the whole theory of universals. He doesn't ditch it, he restructures it. And he's pretty close to Aristotle. You see. But in restructuring it, he still has to work with a logic of process rather than the logic of permanence. You know, think of the pre-Socratics, where the antithesis between Heraclitus and Parmenides is the antithesis between universal change, universal permanence. You see. Well, now we're moving to the notion that, that change is more ultimate than permanence. Change is more ultimate than permanence. When we get to Hegel, I'll make some comments about his logic. It's sometimes said that, by people who haven't read Hegel's logic, that he rejects the law of non-contradiction. He does not. Explicitly, he does not. He simply regards it as trivial in a world of change. You see. You never step into the same river twice, and so you have trouble with the law of non-contradiction at the same time and in the same respect. So the logic of process, dialectic, and dialectic, you remember, is the sort of thinking that says yes, no, you see, and then brings the two together in a synthesis. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Yes, no, well, here it is. And the problem is to grasp this. The idea is that the process of thought, which is the starting point, the process of thought is like a mental meandering, finding your way through a whole maze of ideas. Not this, but this, that's a little bit further, but yeah, we need this and this, you see. A mental meandering that leads to a fuller and fuller understanding, the unfolding concept. And applied to history, that's the view that history tends to have those swings of the pendulum. We're now seeing the conservative reaction in the former Soviet Union, and then there will be a modifying, and so forth. You see? So a dialectical process, a new logic. Therefore, also a new epistemology. A new epistemology. What we had back in the 17th century, 18th century, was a representational theory of knowledge. You see? Representational. Ideas that are subjective, that stand for, oh, but in these German idealists, ideas are no longer representations, static representations in the mind. Ideas arise in dynamic interaction with the world of which we're part, with the larger world. You see. And so what you have is an epistemology that stresses direct awareness, within which there is a gradual clarifying of ideas, clarifying of concepts. Direct awareness, gradual clarification. We'll see that more explicitly as we get to Hegel. And the new metaphysic, well, that's what we've been talking about. How are you going to describe the new metaphysic? It's idealism rather than materialism, rather than dualism. It's idealism. Everything is of the nature of mind, spirit, self. It is a developmental kind of monism, if you like. You can call it an evolutionary idealism. Not all evolutionary thinking is naturalistic. These were evolutionary idealists. Everything is moving towards the full actualization of that spiritual life and vitality which